Good evening, Canby. Welcome to our Canby City Council regular meeting for the wonderful date of November 18th of 2020. Tonight is a pretty full agenda for us. We had an exec session already this evening at 6 o'clock. We've got a couple of poignant things to address this evening, but first and foremost, and most importantly, it is our new city manager's first meeting with us. So Scott, welcome. And we will try to be as gentle as possible for your first meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Really happy to be here. It's an honor, and I'm excited to be on board and working for Canby. I really look forward to working with all of you, our staff team, who have all been great thus far in my first week and a half. And of course, look forward to doing great work for our community. So thanks, and I'll be talking to you more this evening.
Perfect. Well, welcome, and we're glad you're here, sir. First on the agenda is communication. Anything right now, Mr. Archer and Mr. Lindsay, on the communication front?
We have no items under this. We have no business under this item this evening.
Perfect. Thank you. It's our first opportunity for citizen input and community announcements. Generally, because of the fine COVID world that we are in and still being in Zoom, all public comments or public items, community announcements, need to be sent in to our city recorder by 5 o'clock on the date of our city council meetings, and with the topic that you'd like to speak on, and then your contact information. So you have the opportunity to either come in and be part of the Zoom and address the council, or have it in written form, and we can address it at that point as well. Melissa, do we have any citizen input or community announcements at this time?
We do not.
Okay. Well, perfect. Thank you. We're going to move into mayor's business, and I'm going to start off I want to address the recent governor's pause that is now in effect, and specifically want to address the call out regarding gatherings on Thanksgiving Day, and probably just in general over the next 2 weeks. So we, the City of Canby, will be handling this matter as we did regarding our businesses during the first shutdown by Governor Brown. As we did then, we will do now, and that will be that this will be a complaint-driven piece. Our officers will not be out driving around looking for homes with more cars parked in front of them than usual. They will respond to said complaint as an educational piece, and an educational piece only. We really are looking to have our officers teach and educate about safety and potential consequences of large gatherings during this pandemic. Our goal is to work with the public to reduce risks without any harm or negative interactions. And we are really hoping that everyone will have a great Thanksgiving. Please do not make our police officers' jobs any harder than they need to be. They really do not want to be doing this either. That's what you can expect from the City of Canby regarding the governor's, monitoring of gatherings and whatnot over the next couple of weeks. I do want to share some thoughts on the matter of my own. I find another lockdown or quote unquote pause by Governor Brown that includes the policing of who I have in my home, how many, when, and why, a gross overreach. I find pushing this down to our police department to be a wasteful and egregious use of resources and poor judgment. To have them approach private property owners and citizens about how many people they are hosting is truly mind-blowing to me. The governor has asked neighbors to be pitted against neighbors during a time and a crisis when we should be banding together as a community to get through this very challenging time. Who I have for Thanksgiving dinner and how many people I have over is not for the government to know. Regarding the lockdown of our businesses in our community, once again, is heartbreaking. Businesses that have not fully recovered from the last lockdown are now being put in a position of, once again, potentially laying off people. further putting their livelihoods at risk and maybe even losing their businesses forever. This past weekend, I spoke with a number of restaurant owners and a number of gym owners that are part of this pause. The restaurants that I spoke to, I asked them how many customers of theirs have come down with COVID that they were aware of. The answer was 0. And then I asked them about how many people contracted COVID from being in their businesses. And again, the answer was 0. Of the gym owners that I spoke with, I asked the same questions. How many have come down with COVID? How many have contracted COVID from another member? How many have contracted COVID from just being in your gym? To all those questions, the answers were 0. One gym owner I spoke with has had, since the first lockdown, 7,000 registrations or signups to come work out. And not a single one of those members have come down with or given the virus to another person. So my question is, why are we not putting the ownership of the businesses in the hands of the business owners? Why are we punishing the many few that are breaking? Why are we punishing the many versus the few that are breaking the rules? I hear we need to rely on science. I don't disagree with that. Science is also about measured interactions and reactions. What has been measured on a state level of where COVID is being contracted and how is it being contracted? Where is the scientific method being used? I will offer this up about the next 2 weeks and Thanksgiving Day. Please try and use common sense. By that, I mean this. We are in the middle of a pandemic as a community and as a state and as a world. And the science and the measurements and whatnot keep changing weekly on how it is spread. And it means that we have to check and adjust often. So maybe what the governor should have said was, let's be thoughtful on how we approach our family gatherings over the next couple of weeks. For me, that means know your bubble. Who makes up the people that you've been surrounding yourself with these last several weeks? Do you know the people that make up the bubble that they are a part of or that you're going to bring into your home? Have you had conversations about where they have been, who they've been around? That's what I mean by common sense in this matter. Be thoughtful in how you approach these next couple of weeks in your family gatherings. In my home, every year, we have at least 20 family members get together and have Thanksgiving dinner. This year, that's not going to happen. Not because the governor told us not to, but because we're trying to use our God-given talents and brains on how we approach this situation. So I'll be dining with my family, my mother-in-law, and probably my sister-in-law and her family, because we looked at the situation and realized the points of contact that each of these groups has enables us to do that, whereas we can't control that with a greater group. I just ask that you be diligent and be thoughtful. To wrap up my comments, I will say this. As I remind my 16-year-old daughter when she heads out with friends, number one, nothing good happens after midnight. And secondly, make good choices and decisions while she is out. So I ask you, the citizens of the city of Canby, be thoughtful in your actions, in your endeavors, and make good choices these next couple of weeks as it regards to our COVID situation in the pandemic. On other mayor business news, C4 has submitted a letter regarding the state transportation improvement project list and that process to the Oregon Transportation Commission. We highlighted that we would like the Oregon Transportation Commission, as they're looking at the funds for this program, for the STIP grants and things coming up, to really focus on funding either focus on the areas that that look at funding for fix it or enhance. The big goal, is to try to focus on the fix it piece. There's a lot of opportunity throughout the state on a number of fix it projects, but we don't want to lose in sight of enhancing certain areas within the state. Again, at C4, even at the Region 1 Act, we discussed that, again, much of the STIP money is really the only opportunity for rural communities to apply for the funds that are part of this program, whereas Portland and other metropolitan cities get a number of different opportunities to get funding. So that's the big highlight from last meeting, between last meeting and now, regarding C4. The Region 1 Area Commission on Transportation, I have nothing new to report at this time. Last night was the Parks Advisory Board meeting. Gave a couple of updates regarding Maple Street Park Phase 1. So they're in the process here, probably in the next week or so, of winterizing the splash pad. And we did talk about, Jeff Schneider, of our parks team, did comment about the punch list that they're working on still through this, and keeping that somewhat loose in terms of completing, because we want to make sure that when we are able to turn it on full bore, that we can actually test it and make sure that everything's in working order for longer than just 5 minutes to see that the water runs. So that's on that piece. We had a conversation about Maple Street, like a phase 2. So there's been some concept ideas kind of being discussed on that front. Locust Street, that project with the playground. So the fencing, when the construction fencing went up, and the demo for that is going to start, I believe, this week, depending on weather. So we should start to see some changes occurring there at Locust Street Park. We had a master plan conversation. The RFP will, now that Scott Archer is on board, will start a draft process. And so Scott and his team will start looking and working on getting that RFP ready to go. Mr. Archer did attend the parks meeting and to meet the crew, and I know he's making his way through our committees and boards to meet them as well and introduce himself. So really appreciate him being there. And then we had Park Advisory Board interviews. So there's an open spot for the Park Advisory Board, and we had 3 candidates that were interviewed by the Park Advisory Board. And I can't tell you who they are because I don't know if they've been notified yet. So there are 3 very good qualified people for the Parks Board, and the person that will fill the spot, any one of them would do a great job. So I'm very excited about that. And then Scott, one of the things that came up out of the conversation with the Park Advisory Board was a workshop perhaps regarding system development charges. And I know that the Parks Board expressed interest in that being a piece for them. But I'd like to, maybe, if that's something that we might look forward to in doing here in this next year, that might be something worth holding with the city council, perhaps parks, and maybe even a few of our other boards. Maybe just do a giant Zoom education piece on SDC charges and kind of rules and whatnot, since that seems to come up often regarding many of our committees. Is, well, gosh, we've got all this SDC money, why can't we just start scratching checks and writing projects? That might be, just throw that out there as a possibility, as maybe a multiple board training session. And then that is all that I have this evening. We will go into councilor comments and liaison reports, and we're just going to go right around my screen. And so, Council President Dale, you are first, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At our last meeting, we talked a bit about the South Ivy project and the relocation of the power lines along that by Canby Utility. Just for an update, in general for the council and public. The mayor was able to personally meet with Dan Murphy, general manager of Canby Utility, in the interim, and we've had some e-chats, and I was able to speak with Dan personally to get the latest update. He has checked with the county engineers today, and he says Clackamas County is not waiting on them for anything additional at this time. So they don't appear to be a blocker on the county moving forward. His understanding with the county remains that Canby Utility will be relocating, whether above ground or under, into private property easement space, which the county has agreed to. And the reasons that's attractive to Canby Utility is whether they're above ground or below ground, there's no risk of them having to dig through sidewalks or city streets in the future. So that's a win for us as the city. They get a little bit of a win. It's not big financially, though. Councilor Parker will appreciate this. They won't be in city right away, right? And so they will actually not be subject to right-of-way franchise fees for that particular section of the highway. It's not much. That's a little bit of a win for them. But actually the motivation was to not be inside of city infrastructure in the future and put it at risk for repairs. You know, undergrounding is a good thing. It seldom has a problem. It has a long life. It's not subject to ice storms and windstorms. That's the good news about it. The bad news about undergrounding is if there is a problem with it, it is messy and expensive to repair because it's underground. In the end, Canby Utility's position is still that the city should pay for overgrounding, if you want to call that above grounding, if that's the verb. They do have an estimate on the price. Excuse me, I got that backwards. We should pay for the price of undergrounding. They have an estimate on the above grounding price, which has come in at just over $201,000, substantially less than was expected. So that's really good news for Canby Utility. And if we wish to go underground and we can come to an agreement with them on finances, they are very, very happy to credit the amount it would cost them to go above ground towards our effort. So for instance, if the price to underground is, I'll make up a number, I have no idea what it is. Let's say it's $500,000. Our net amount would be $300,000. They would credit the above grounding price because they have to do it anyway, right? That's the rationale. They are diligently working on the undergrounding cost right now. It's a bit of a slow process to do, but they are working on it. If you're interested in the gory details, it runs in PVC conduit. So it doesn't run in big concrete pipes anymore. It's in PVC conduit. So the big orange pipe that you see alongside the road that's used for natural gas and such, they run in that same. Interestingly, on funding this, how might we do it if we wish to? The mayor and Mr. Archer will be addressing this later, I understand, under new business, and we've had some exciting developments there. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll leave it there for you, and that concludes.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I was remiss in calling out that we do have a change to our agenda this evening, and adding in, we'll call it 8.5 on the agenda. We'll add in new business this evening, the South Ivy project. So we will come back and have further conversation on that. So thank you for that recap. I appreciate it very much. Councilor Hensley, you're next on my screen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll have a report from Traffic Safety Commission at the next meeting. I did have the first in a while Zoom meeting with the Suicide Prevention Task Force today, and we'll be working on another series of PSAs. So that'll be good in this time. We kind of want to address isolation and things like this, and also for the first responders. So we're going to do another round of those. And I would just kind of want to echo what you were saying about the pandemic and Governor Brown's orders. The only thing I would add to it is I find it very disappointing that things like the rise in substance abuse and domestic violence and suicide, those rates are going up so high, and no one seems to be addressing it. So I hope that changes soon. And that concludes.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Hensley. Appreciate that. Councilor Parker.
Good evening, and thank you. Yeah, I've got a couple of issues here. First, let me join in on the topic of our pause or freeze. You're not wrong, Meryl, but even the best intentions, when you take a look at your pod, I was notified Kim and her husband and brother and wife and 3 children decided to have a family dinner. Well, now all of them have come down with COVID. So even the best intentions sometimes can miscalculate on whether one person is a vector. So there's a lot of politics and a lot of concern. And like you, I sat down across the table from a Canby restaurant owner as he had 5 names written on his piece of paper of people that he was laying off, and it broke my heart. So I'm not an expert on that, so I'll leave it to the experts. How about some good news? The fairgrounds, the Scare Fair, huge success. In addition to having significant profit for the fairgrounds, which we're having no profit, it also put 3 Halloween production companies to work for a month that otherwise in the COVID situation would not be working. So that was great. I want to call out Fair Board member Lauren Humphreys, who had an idea earlier this year and has continued to push. And finally, it's coming on that on November 27th, we will be having a winter fair at the fairgrounds from November 27th through Christmas. So think of big drive-throughs like the Speedway and Peacock Lane and that sort of thing. The county fair board is committing significant resources to have a permanent Christmas drive-through. So again, that can be found on the Clackamas County Fair's website starting November 27th, going through Christmas. I attended adult center Zoom meeting, and again, some fantastic news. Every year, the Meals on Wheels program loses a few people due to attrition, that they have other things to do or they can't do it anymore in terms of being drivers. So the adult center had lost a couple of their drivers, and Kathy Robinson, the director there, put out a message on social media in Canby. And 4 hours later, she took it down because she had 10 new drivers volunteering to take people food during a pandemic. So sometimes I'm really, really proud of our people up there. And each year, the Adult Center has a big Thanksgiving dinner. This year, it's going to be a drive-through. So for people who would like to have a Thanksgiving dinner, please call the Adult Center in advance so that they can do some planning on the number of meals that they need to put together. And then finally, Mayor, in a comment on having the Parks Committee at work, having a city manager with background in parks, just to let you know where I'm coming from. My preference is that we delegate to the Parks Committee, empower them to decide where the parks are going to be built, what type of parks are going to be built, and to provide the oversight of the parks maintenance. The council has plenty to do running the rest of the city instead of doing these things. And I don't mean to be flip on this, but I don't think you can find a lot of people who were really pleased with the final outcome of the splash pad. I mean, it was an example of so many chefs in the kitchen that I'm not sure any one constituency group really thought that it was a satisfactory conclusion. So My preference as we move forward, in addition to taking a look at specific parks, taking a look at the process and how we do things, my vote would be to have the Parks Committee in charge. What's built, what level of maintenance do we have, and what the priority list is. That's it for me this week.
Great, thank you. Sorry, just jotting down. Councillor Spoon.
I have no comments this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Farwig.
There we go. I'll be short and sweet tonight. Fire Board is meeting currently, the same time as we are right now, so I don't have anything for there. I am traveling this week, so unfortunately I was not able to make it onto the Zoom for the Library Board meeting last night, so I will be following up with Danny Smith for that. So I have nothing there either. Last meeting, we congratulated all of the those who won their elections, but things changed. And so I just wanted to publicly shout out and say congratulations to Jordan Tibbles, who came back to take the 4th spot on there. And I was excited to work with Jason Padden. I know that he was excited to come on to the council, but unfortunately those numbers changed. So Jason, great campaign. And we look forward to continuing to hear your voice at our council meetings. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Sean, for that. I appreciate that. Okay. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move for the approval of the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes of the November 4th, 2020 City Council regular meeting.
Second.
Motion to accept the consent agenda made by Council President Dale and seconded by Councillor Varwig, which include the approval of the minutes of the November 4th, 2020 City Council regular meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
We have 5 ayes. Anyone opposed? That carries 5-0. Next on our agenda this evening is a public hearing. We're doing a text amendment 20-01 regarding telecommunications facilities, amending Title 16 of the Canby Municipal Code. The hearing or matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please fill out a yellow public testimony card or email into the city recorder at the appropriate time. Please, we will let you make your comments. If you're there at City Hall, we'll let you come to the microphone, state your name and the interest of the matter. Or if you're here on the Zoom, we will give you that opportunity as well. For those that are interested in testifying as either proponents or opponents, please let our city recorder know at this time. Do we have any proponents or opponents that you know of, Melissa?
Mr. Mayor, we do have someone, Kim Allen has signed up to speak to you.
Okay, perfect. Ms. Allen, are you a proponent or opponent of said piece tonight?
I guess an opponent that hopes to be a proponent.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay.
For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. All questions must be directed through the mayor. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received both for and against shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. We'll have the staff report, Then we'll have questions, if any, by the hearing body or staff. Then I will open the public hearing for testimony. Proponents will have not more than 3 minutes, and opponents may not have more than 3 minutes as well. I will then close the public hearing. Questions, again, if any, by the hearing body, and then discussion by the hearing body. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure of the hearing at this time? All right, not seeing any, then I will turn it over. I believe, Eric, are you here to present on this topic this evening?
Mr. Mayor and Council, yes, this is Scott Archer. I just want to acknowledge that Eric Forsell, our associate planner, is going to provide you with the staff report this evening. Mr. Lindsay and I will be here to help with any questions you may have of us as well.
Great. Thank you, sir. Eric, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. I am going to share a screen with you. Bear with me. Can you all see that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So like you had mentioned, Mr. Mayor, this is a public hearing to deliberate the text amendment, City File TA 2001, telecommunications facilities. The purpose is to amend Title 16 of the Canby Municipal Code to add a new chapter, 1655, telecommunications facilities, and then to modify existing chapters in the code so that they are consistent with the new code language found in 1655. I want to start off with public comments received. I received a comment from Kim Allen. She's president of this hearing. She represents Verizon Wireless, and she submitted a comment to us today at 1:15 p.m. It would have been addressed in the staff report, but given the proximity to the public hearing, it didn't make it to you guys. So in that effort, I will attempt to summarize her comments and then provide some feedback to her comments. First, Kim indicated that there was no opportunity to work with staff on this text amendment. I can only speak for myself and my planning team, but I've never received any communication from Kim Allen, her organization, or Verizon Wireless until today. So it may have gone somewhere else, but as far as I know, planning staff never received any communication to discuss this text amendment. And I think that point will become even more salient on my next slide. She also indicated that the undergrounding requirements would corrode equipment and affect the wireless signal. Two things there. First, I'd state that the undergrounding requirements are for ancillary equipment, we are not expecting them to place the actual antennas underground.
Can I quickly interrupt you, Eric? Sorry, this is Joe Lindsay. I will say that there was a Colleen DeShazer who we forwarded the idea that this was coming in front of us. That's how they even know about it. She was told about the packet and where to find this information. So that's how they know about it. So it isn't that there wasn't any interaction, but the interaction between Colleen happened to point her in the direction of this. So from City Hall's perspective, just to make the record clear. Sorry for your interruption.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. Yeah, I was merely speaking from planning staff's perspective during the crafting of these text amendments. As far as the undergrounding goes as well, the requirement is only if it's technically feasible. So if the applicant can demonstrate that it would not be technically feasible to place their equipment underground, then they have that option. Her third comment was that the shot clocks were not consistent with federal codes. I'm looking at 47 Code of Federal Regulations, section 1.6003, which states the shot clock requirements. Although not verbatim, they basically mirror those requirements. So I'm not sure how they're inconsistent with what federal regulations state. She might have more to elaborate on that. And then lastly was a comment about eligible facilities, which is it's related to the Spectrum Act, basically stating that some equipment can be removed, modified, fixed, and in some cases co-located, and it's an expedited review. We're not intending, and this planning staff is not intending, and the code is not intending to take this out of the playbook for wireless applicants. The intention there for us is to include an option in the application form, which is forthcoming should this be approved, so that if they have an eligible facilities request, we know about it and will allow them to proceed as needed. So I wanted Mr. Mayor and Council to be aware of these comments and planning staff's feedback on them. So I think I wanted to include this slide because I think it's important to note that we now have had 7 public meetings on this. This would be the 7th, 2 of which were joint work sessions between Council and Planning Commission. In February, we kind of sparked this conversation saying that this was coming. And then on the 16th of September, we came back to discuss kind of formalizing the process, and that we intended to bring this to Planning Commission. Staff had 3 work sessions with Planning Commission to go through the code, hear thoughts, input, changes. And then on the 9th of November, planning staff brought it to the commission for a public hearing. And Planning Commission recommended to send this to City Council with a recommendation of approval on a 5-0 unanimous vote. And then here we are today for the 18th. So I'm gonna do a little bit of framework here. I think this is useful. Why are we proposing these changes now? I think it's fair to say that wireless data usage, phone calls, all of it continues to expand at an exponential rate. There's studies that show that upwards of 90% of people use cell phones, and data is a big component of that. Data is basically any time you're using your phone for anything but calling, as far as I know. And as part of this, small cell installations are one of the methods that the industry appears to be using to meet the demands of increased capacity, speeds, and usage. And these small cells, I think, are more primarily driven towards the data usage. Planning staff is bringing these changes because without design and application standards, in theory, a telecommunications company could pull a building permit, electrical permit at Clackamas County, and city staff may have little to no review. So essentially what could happen without these standards or some form of standards you could see these micro cell or large cell installations without any review from city planning staff. Planning staff contend that these standards also institute reasonable time, place, and manner requirements on the telecommunications deployment in the city of Canby. We don't believe that they are so onerous that they in fact prohibit the deployment of this equipment, but they do place reasonable restrictions around location, some visual impact, and height, among other things. So, as I mentioned, a lot of this new technology is likely to be deployed in the rights of way. So that's going to be streets, pathways, potentially in the city, and maybe on Highway 99. They are much smaller scale than your traditional cell towers, which you can see in a few places in Canby. And planning staff is not clear on to the extent at which telecommunications companies would deploy this equipment. But from my understanding, with discussions with the city attorney, is that there are potential applicants waiting in the wings. And if that's the case, this code is needed. We need to have the framework for applicants to go through and for staff to review deployments. So a big part of this entire picture is that federal law over time has consistently preempted the ability of the local jurisdiction to restrict, place regulations upon, or limit the deployment of not only large towers, but small towers. And that's happened over time, and it continues to, federal law continues to tighten the screws, as it were. The first major federal law was the Communications Act of 1934, basically stating that cities cannot restrict any kind of telecommunications equipment. Not as relevant as the 3 bullet points below it, but it does start the framework. Telecommunications Act of 1996, the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012, which is commonly referred to as the Spectrum Act, placed even more restrictions. One of those includes the eligible facilities standards, which our contributor from the Wireless Policy Group had mentioned. And then the most recent one is the FCC small cell order, which gave more guidance or direction from the Fed about what a local jurisdiction can do with small cells. The changes that are being proposed in the text amendment create a separate section of the development code that encapsulates all of the telecommunications facilities. That's going to be big towers, small towers, replacements, co-locations. Co-locations is basically locating an antenna on an existing facility or tower. The text amendments allow the city to regulate deployment of telecommunication facilities in the public rights of way, but also, I think, and this is important, on public and private real property. I think it's possible that a telecommunications company might find it advantageous to locate equipment on a private building just outside of the right of way. Don't know that for certain, but this code does address that. Planning staff is confident that these amendments as written are at a low risk of legal challenge and are thoroughly consistent with federal law. and that they provide requirements and restrictions that reduce impacts. So that's going to be your visual impacts, the size of the structures and the facilities, the area they take up, and the location. The changes also include the important shot clock requirements, and shot clock is a colloquialism for the amount of time the city has to make a decision on an application to deploy telecommunications equipment. And that can be for small cell, large towers, co-locations, all of it. They have different shot clock requirements, but the requirements in our code are basically line item similar to what the Code of Federal Regulations states. We have a standardized application and review process. I think we ask for planning staff and the city ask for robust applications so that staff can make an informed decision about what they're reviewing and potentially approving. And then an important aspect is to include the severability clauses should law, rules, or precedents change. This is a moving target, if you will. The laws around telecommunications seemingly change more frequently than a lot of the work we do in planning. So we want to be able to make sure that if an item in our code comes under some kind of legal challenge or is attacked, that the remainder of the code stands. So where did planning staff get most of our product from, and how did we frame this text amendment? We used model code language from the National Association of Cities, the League of Oregon Cities, Oregon City, and Lane County. I'd say that National Association of Cities, and especially the League of Oregon Cities, put out great work products. They use lawyers, professional planners, city administrators to create their model code. I'd say it's darn near bulletproof. It's, I'm not a lawyer, but I'd contend that this is good product that they put out, and that's what planning staff used a lot of our or hung our hat on. The other thing I'll mention is that both the National Association of Cities and the League of Oregon Cities, when they wrote their model code, consulted with Verizon Wireless, AT&T, and I think a number of other telecommunications companies when they did this. So they didn't craft a code that didn't seek input from the end user. And I think that's important to mention because that's essentially the same with the code that's in front of you today. Oregon City was used partly because of the recommendations from this body. They're a close neighbor and they had a good code. And also Lane County, they, I believe, have a good program and outfit for dealing with telecommunications facilities. So we use some of that code language as well. And I would be remiss to say that we used the work sessions with City Council and Planning Commission thoroughly in the crafting this code. The input that we got from planning staff received from Council and Planning Commission was important and lives in the code that you see today. So these are the approval criteria for a text amendment. The authorization to initiate amendments can come from private persons or the city itself. In this case, it's the city. An application was made by the city with no fee paid because it was initiated by the city staff. We are having a public hearing on the amendment as we speak. And then the last section D speaks to consistency with the comprehensive plan and plans of the state, county, and local districts, and how they order and preserve functions and local aspects of land conservation and development. The staff report details how it's consistent with that. I'd say that the telecommunications amendment is absolutely consistent with our comprehensive plan and plans with the county, state, and local districts. The second criteria is a public need for change. Planning staff would contend, and as I had mentioned in the beginning of this report, that without language in place for the telecommunications facilities, we could potentially see deployment without any review. And that would not serve the public well. The third item is whether the proposed change will serve the public need better than any other change that might be expected to be made. The staff contends that this text amendment is the best alternative at present. The other alternatives would be not to approve this or to make no changes or to modify the code as is proposed. The fourth item is whether the change will preserve and protect the health, safety, and general welfare of the residents in the community. And staff contends that this code does just that. It requires applicants to have professional engineers state that certain requirements about radiation from cell towers and equipment meets safety standards, and those requirements need to be signed off by a professional engineer registered in the state of Oregon. And then the statewide planning goals, although not very germane to this particular text amendment, I believe, and staff believes, that the statewide planning goals are consistent with this amendment, and there are no issues there. The Planning Commission, as I had mentioned previously, at their public hearing, voted on a unanimous 5-0 vote to recommend that the City Council adopt the proposed text amendment, TA 2001. And then staff's recommendation is that based on the findings and conclusions presented in this report, in your packet and attachments and comments received in public hearing, to recommend that the City Council approve and adopt the changes outlined in TA 2001 telecommunications facilities. This is a sample motion. I'll leave this up for you all if you care to use it. That at this time concludes my staff report. I am happy, able, and willing to address questions, concerns, or any other issues that council or you have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. Since you've got the sample motion on the screen, everyone, if you want to comment or ask a question, if you could open up under participants the list of names and then use the raise hand function. I'll call on you through there. So Eric, all in all, with all of the the enhancements to the smaller facilities that we're looking at here, really the design and location of said equipment is really about the only control that we really have at this point in juncture, correct? That's
correct, Mr. Mayor. We have basically a playbook given to us from the feds, and we can limit and request certain visual shrouding techniques or ways to make it less visible, where it can be placed, the general size, but things that make it so restrictive that they are not on an equal playing field with similar uses in the right of way would not be allowed. If that answers your question.
No, it does. The other question I think I had was, with this, putting this together in the code and making it part of the Canby Municipal Code, does this give us enough nimbleness to make changes to this code here, and we maybe get a few of these under our belt and see what that's shaping up like?
I think it does. And I think that's a good point, in that once we see a couple of these, we'll see how well it works. I think the code as presented to you today is in good shape. It has built-in flexibilities for the applicant. Should they not be able to meet certain requirements, they can ask for basically a built-in variance, which doesn't require them to come to Planning Commission or you as City Council. So I think it has an appropriate amount of nimbleness so that it can bend appropriately and not break.
Yeah, because I think that's something that reading through this, that, and I want to make sure of whenever we go through and we're adding things to our code, it definitely, and as you said, I think in your presentation, that there's a number of astute lawyers that have ground this to a pulp to, ensure it's written well. I'm sure that there's also a counter group of attorneys that are trying to figure out new ways to punch holes in said municipal code. And I want to make sure that there's enough, as you said, bendable points to it to where when we see that might be something that's occurring, that we have the ability to shore that up so that we don't end up with something that we don't want in our city.
Yes, I would agree with that. And we have the severability portion as well. So if something blows up in another state or federally that doesn't work with our code, we can cut that off and the code still lives on. So with that, basically the built-in variance, I think it's pretty flexible, but still rigid enough that we're getting what we generally want out of the code, and hopefully wouldn't need to bring this back to City Council again for major changes.
Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Any questions, Council, of staff? Councilor Spoon, anything? No? Councilor Varwig? I think Councilor Parker's there in his shadow backdrop there. Not seeing anything. Councilor Parker, you're good? Okay. Council President Dale?
No questions. Maybe a brief under discussion afterwards.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Hensley, any questions for staff?
Not at this time, thanks.
All right, great. Thank you, Eric. Sit tight, because we have a tendency to boomerang back to you on these kinds of things. I will open up the public hearing for testimony. So we will start with proponents. Ms. Allen, did you become a proponent, or are we staying as an opponent?
I think for now we'll stay as an opponent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Since we have no proponents, then I will go back to the opponents now. Ms. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. My name is Kim Allen. I'm with the Wireless Policy Group. I'm a consultant for public outreach for Verizon. I was also one of the drafters of the League of Oregon Cities Code over the course of many, many months and many, many meetings. We appreciate the work to date that has been done by the city and the Planning Commission and staff. As Mr. Forcell indicated, the law in this area is changing very rapidly. This summer, there was an order having to do with the eligible facilities requests that are not contained in the code. That's one of the things that concerns us, is that there are not criteria for processing an eligible facilities request pulled out in the code. We would recommend that be there. Also, with respect to the shot clocks, especially with small wireless facilities, the city has 60 days for attachment to existing structures and 90 days for new structures in the right of way to process and give a final decision on the application. And that clock starts to run not, as the code says, when the application is materially complete, but it starts to run when the application is first offered to the city. So there's a whole lot of difference between those two dates that we're concerned about. Also, some of the processes that are set up here, like the variance process that Mr. Forcell was discussing, are type 2 and type 3 processes. There's also an appeal provided, and those types of processes take time. And we would submit that they can't be really accomplished realistically within the very short shot clocks that the federal government has imposed. And I apologize for the lateness of the letter. We received word through Colleen DeShazer on Friday afternoon from the city that this was going to you today. I understand from Ms. DeShazer, she's reached out to the city on several occasions. We're reaching out to all the cities right now because we understand that these codes are moving forward. And as stakeholders and users of the code, we would like to have input to make sure that not only is your code protective of the city's goals here in terms of the aesthetics, but also that they're workable and that they do not materially inhibit our ability to deploy this technology, especially at this time when people are working from home, having meetings such as this, and really accelerating the demand on our network. So I did a very, very speedy review through your code and found that was an issue. There was an issue that I saw potentially with large setbacks that are required for our macro facilities. We also, in terms of the equipment to be undergrounded, there's an issue with the radios themselves, which are ancillary equipment. They can't be very far away from the antennas because these are low power facilities. And we have not yet found a vault that would keep them safe, keep them away from moisture, and still provide the airflow that they need. So having to go for a demonstration that this is not technically feasible every time adds complexity, unneeded complexity to the application process. We are just asking for one more continuance of the public hearing, to hold the public hearing open so that we can meet with staff, make sure that we're on the same page, hopefully with compliance with federal law and with the workability of the code. I don't think that there are major sea changes that are needed. However, I do want to make sure that the city has a workable code that will allow us to deploy and will also protect the city. So we're asking for a continuance of the public hearing, holding the hearing open to a date certain at your next council meeting for a week or two so that we can concur with Mr. Forcell or confer with Mr. Forcell about some of the changes that we're requesting. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the councilor or the mayor has.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Allen. I really appreciate that. So I just want to recap real quick. So start off, you mentioned that there wasn't any criteria. I missed the first part. There was no criteria for, and I missed the second part. Okay.
For the variance.
And then your concern with the shot clock was that there was differences depending on when that application was made versus when it was maybe started in process.
Yeah, when it was deemed materially complete. That usually happens sometime after the application is submitted.
And then again, it was the type 1, type 2 variances that you were talking about there with the criteria piece that weren't quite flushed out, maybe in your opinion.
Yeah, I think it's code section 1655 H, I think, is the variance section, and yes, we don't see criteria there for meeting it, and also there's a reference to the process being type 2 or type 3, which would require some sort of public notice and add additional time to a very, very short timeline.
Okay. And then the concern about setbacks, was that having to do with the equipment that might be above ground?
That's in terms of the macro facilities. There's a reference throughout, and really, I didn't have an adequate opportunity to really analyze what the city wants to do. I saw references to facilities having to be 660 feet away from Highway 99, and so I didn't have adequate time to figure out what was being required there. So I just wanted to put a stake in the ground so that we can make sure that, a setback that's the height of the tower or the height of the first engineered break point at the top is usually consistent with what other cities are doing. But I was unable to figure out which process was going to be needed for which height of tower, and the reference to the 660 feet, which seemed to repeat throughout the code. So we just wanted an opportunity to sit down with Mr. Forcell and kind of talk through these things and make sure that we understand, and that any technical issues that we have are at least raised to the city.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Ms. Allen. I appreciate it. Any other questions for Ms. Allen? No? Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you, Ms. Allen. I'm going to close the public hearing and then come back to you, Eric. Thoughts on the pieces that Ms. Allen brought up?
Sure. I'll start moving backwards with the distances discussion about macro towers. So that portion existed in our code already. Some of those towers, especially new ones, do not gain the benefit of expedited reviews. So they go through a normal land use decision process in the state of Oregon. That's why they have those setbacks. So as far as constructing a new macro tower over a certain height, they do have existing standards that were taken from the code as it exists today. As far as the, so I think I'm feeling confident about the macro towers. So macro towers being the large cell phone towers that we typically associate with telecommunications equipment.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the deviation from design standards, the criteria are that the applicant can obtain a deviation from the design standards if they're not technically feasible for the applicant, they impede the effective operation of the wireless facility, significantly impair a desired network or desired performance objective, conflicts with the pole owner's requirements, or materially inhibits or limits the provision of wireless service.
And Eric, you're referring to the variance question that was brought up in 16.55?
Yep, correct. Okay. So essentially what that would trigger is that the applicant could request this from the director. They would need to tailor their request to basically address that specific issue that they can't meet and provide that to the city. I mean, I think the other important part to mention is some of this will live in an application. We'll ask for eligible facilities, a small cell deployment, a large cell deployment, a co-location. Eligible facilities is a catch-all term for certain co-locations, certain modifications, which basically means removing or replacing with new stuff, or doing work to the ancillary equipment, power equipment. And I think that's easily captured in an application. I'm not necessarily opposed to having that language, but I'm not sure what it gains. So that would be my comment on eligible facilities. The next portion about shot clocks is that in the code, bear with me 1 second, I'm looking at it. So our code specifically states that co-locations for small wireless facilities will occur when within 60 days following the reception of a materially complete application. And I think, I don't want to interpret Ms. Allen's comments, but the way the Code of Federal Regulations reads is that there is the opportunity for the local jurisdiction to make a call on whether that application is materially complete or not. So there's a tolling period, and it would be.
Aaron?
Yes.
Can I interrupt as well?
Yep.
This is Joe Lindsay. Also under sub I, under the administration, we define timelines for the shot clock, and they are supposed to be pursuant to all federal law. So it isn't that our code is trying to add anything different than federal law. We're actually trying to echo federal law, and therefore there should be some assurance if she looks under I on page 26 of the council packet. It's page 6 of 24 under the 1655 telecommunications facilities proposed ordinance. But the idea there is our shot clock, we're actually attempting to define it by the federal law. So if there is an argument as to what federal law means, federal law wins. And so if an applicant comes in and there even is a dispute, it will be settled in the federal law's favor, if that helps.
Okay.
Yeah, I would echo that. The point of this code is not to be more restrictive than federal law. Planning staff was not intending to take this another step forward. I think that as far as applications being materially deemed complete, which I believe Ms. Allen was contending was the hang-up point, is there is the opportunity within 10 days of receiving an application for the local jurisdiction to notify the applicant whether it's not materially complete. So assuming that it is materially complete, we won't notify them and we would process it within the shot clocks as described. If it is materially incomplete, then we will follow the Code of Federal Regulations and notify them within that timeline. I know this is, it's a little difficult to parse out what the differences are, partly for me as staff, between what we're presenting and what Ms. Allen is has an issue with.
Okay, well, with that being said, I mean, it sounds like those pieces that she's mentioning or has mentioned are covered and are addressed in the CMC.
I feel like they are. As the person who's been holding this code for several months and bringing it both to Planning Commission and back and forth. And I think Joe has a good point in that the code mentions numerous times that the intent is to be consistent with Code of Federal Regulations. It's written in black ink in the code. So I think that any concerns from Miss Allen that our code is an overreach beyond what is prescribed by the federal government is not accurate.
And what I will also mention is, we have, as Mr. Forcell said, we had code existing before today, and it actually still exists today unless and until you pass this and it amends it, that had a lot of these provisions in it, right? And furthermore, we have an existing telecommunications code, 1236, that actually is more stringent about undergrounding everything. So this, in effect, is actually softening the undergrounding issue and calling ancillary equipment, allowing for feasibility to actually soften the undergrounding. So what exists today is worse for the telecommunications companies than if you pass this. And that is my extra take on this.
Council, any follow-up questions or comments on this? Council President Dale, you've unmuted.
Just a few comments. Is this our discussion portion, Mr. Mayor, or do I need to wait?
Well, I guess if there are no further questions of staff and follow-up from the presentation, then yes, we can move into discussion.
All righty. First up, I wanted to let you know I let Mr. Paul Hauer, president of Canby Telephone Association, know that this was on the agenda, and he sent back a very nice response. I have forwarded that to our city recorder. It came in this morning, so I apologize. It was not able to be seen by you all, but it's available from Melissa if you would like it for the public record. The salient sentence in it is that, quote, "We have reviewed the information and we do not think it creates any undue burden or concern for Canby Telephone Association doing business as Direct Link. And as always, we look forward to new technology and will be leaping into the 5G spectrum foray as early as 2021. So you can read the record for yourself, but Canby Tel had no objections to our code after their review. Just a few comments, Mr. Mayor, regarding setback. As I recall, we've had some pretty recent experience with macro cell towers. It was subject of quite some discussion, I believe, for one sited just barely on the south side of town. That was pre-COVID or last year. I don't remember the exact date, Joe. But setbacks were an issue. Height of the tower was an issue. Breakpoints were an issue. So I think city staff and council has a pretty good grip on the setback issue, and I don't have any concerns there with what our code is doing. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that our language is well modeled on other language that's already been implemented by other jurisdictions, and you've taken advantage of their extensive legal fees. And in some of those cases, Verizon was also involved. So I have good confidence in that. I believe in shamelessly plagiarizing other good language whenever possible, right? So far as the shot clocks go, I looked at that. I don't have any concerns. I agree with Eric. There's a 10-day period in there, and that's passes a reasonable person test, right? It would not be reasonable just to let any old submitted application, if it had nothing more than a ridiculous lack of information on it, to trigger a shot clock. That's just a reasonableness protection. So I don't see any issue there for us. And from my perspective, we're acting in good faith. We're honoring federal regulations, and we are not trying to block installations. We're just trying to provide a good, solid, workable, compliant framework. So, Mr. Mayor, barring our planning department or city attorney urging a continuance, I'm fine with passing this tonight.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Councilor Hensley, did you have any comment or question?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I concur with Tim now.
Okay. I guess if there's no other discussion, then I guess we can move into a proposed motion of the text amendment. Eric, do you have that motion if you want to put it back up on the screen for?
Melissa's also provided one on our agenda under ordinance 1539.
Do we need to close the public hearing first?
I already did that before discussion.
Right.
Yep, it's okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'll move for ordinance 1539, an ordinance amending Canby's Title 16 of the Canby Municipal Code, adding newly created Code Chapter 16.55 for telecommunications facilities and modifying existing chapters in the title to be consistent with Chapter 16.55.
A second.
I'm sorry, was there a second on that?
Yes, Councilor Hensley.
So the motion's been made by Council President Dale and seconded by Councilor Hensley to adopt ordinance 1539, an ordinance amending Canby's Title 16 of the Canby Municipal Code, adding newly created Code Chapter 16.55 for telecommunications facilities and modifying existing chapters in the title to be consistent with Chapter 16.55. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carries 5-0.
And can you hear me?
Yes, sir, Joe.
This is Joe Lindsay. Can you do a second motion as well? There was some language that Mr. Porcel was saying that has to do with doing an oral decision in favor of TA-01, the text amendment, because it's technically a Chapter 16 planning code text amendment as well. And so can you also do that? Because the one ordinance is accepting the new 1655, but we made text amendments to the other existing ordinances. And so we could use a second motion in favor of TA-01.
Got it. So Eric, if you can pop that back up on the screen.
Sure.
I think it was the suggested motion there at the end of your slides.
Melissa, can you make me host, please?
You are now host.
Can you see that?
No,
Yeah.
it was there. There it is. All right, so I needed a motion to adopt the proposed text amendments.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve and adopt the proposed text amendments as described in the staff report and direct staff to implement the changes to Title 16 of the Canby Municipal Code outlined in TA 20-01 telecommunications facilities.
Thank you, sir. I do need a second if we want to move forward or not. Thank you, Council President Dale. So motion's been made by Councilor Varwig and seconded by Council President Dale to adopt the proposed text amendments as described in the staff report and direct staff to implement the changes to Title 16 of the Canby Municipal Code outlined in TA 20-01, the telecommunications facilities. Let me go back to seeing everyone. Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? That carries 5-0. All right. So a little bit of reversal. So we were okay with 1539, Joe, as it is, even though we did that first, not second.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. So then we'll move into ordinance number 1541, an ordinance amending Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 2.20.040 regarding, nope, that's the next item. Sorry about that. Jumping the gun. All right, so we're done with the telecommunications piece and we're all good on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Eric, thank you for your presentation. Greatly appreciated. I know that you know this now very intimately and we'll expect you to keep an eye on it for us, okay?
Will do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next on the agenda is ordinance 1541, an ordinance amending the Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 2.20.040 regarding the library board term of office in the city of Canby. And I'll turn that over to Scott to give us this conversation.
Well, actually, I can take it. I'm Joe Lindsay.
Okay, Joe.
And Scott gave me the thumbs up here. I'm simply bringing what came before you last meeting. Carol Palmer was asking at the behest of the library board to change their attendance policy for their board in particular. And after discussion, it was decided that we should make sure and get to this one since it was a very specific request first. We can start to look at attendance policies for other boards if need be. But this particular request came after that board actually voted for it. And the language was to make it just slightly more strict so that what would trigger somebody coming to you guys, because still the library board members serve at your pleasure, so you could always remove them if you want. But what would really trigger as far as an attendance issue that could be brought in front of you, which is still permissive, but could be brought in front of you a little bit sooner if it isn't 3 consecutive absences anymore, it's 3 within a given year. And so that will help if somebody has absenteeism, but just maybe not 3 in a row, because they don't meet so often that it is almost a de facto no longer being an active member if you have a lot of absences in some of these. So we're just bringing to you what they were codifying what they were asking for, and I would suggest that you adopt it.
Great, Joe. I appreciate that. And I'm glad that we separated it out and to just take care of it for the library board. I appreciate that. Any questions of staff on this matter? I think it seems pretty well buttoned up in that regard. So fantastic. Is there a motion then regarding this one?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt ordinance 1541, an ordinance amending Canby Municipal Code, CMC Chapter 2.20.040 regarding the library board term of office in the city of Canby.
Great, thank you. Councilor Spoon, thank you. Motion's been made by Councilor Varwig and seconded by Councilor Spoon to approve ordinance number 1541, an ordinance amending Canby Municipal Code, CMC, Chapter 2.20.040 regarding the library board term in office in the city of Canby. Any further discussion or comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would just like to say that if we're going to make this adjustment to one board, I would really like to see us look at the others and have consistency and policy for all of the boards and commissions to have very consistent policy on this so that there's no confusion.
I'm for
the measure. I'm for the motion. I'm just thinking that we should look at all of the committees in the same manner.
So you're looking at a unilateral change versus a board by board appeal to the council?
Yeah, I think consistency would be a good thing. We should look at it, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Any comment or on that piece, anyone? Councilor Spoon?
Yeah, I stand by what I said last time when we discussed this. I think we were all in agreement that we needed to make adjustments to all the boards. I just think it should scale. Some only meet every other month, and I think missing more than 3 meetings at that point is missing more than half of them. So I just think it should scale towards, it should scale to how often the meetings occur. not just a singular standard. 3 meetings at a commission that meets 2 times a month or once a month is very different than 3 meetings in one that meets every 2 or 3 months.
So could we say, just as a matter of discussion piece here, make a recommendation to each of the boards and committees that they look at their attendance policies and what they have on the books, and if that suits them, and again, it's different. I mean, that's being more autonomous than necessarily collective. Councilor Morwig?
I was just thinking maybe that's something that each counselor might want to bring back to each board that they're liaison to, and make that suggestion, make sure that it's something that the board absolutely wants to do. And some boards may not want to adjust their attendance policy, and I don't know that I'd want to force them to make a change that they don't currently want to make.
Okay, fair enough. Councilor Spoon, did you want to add something? No? Okay, Councilor Parker?
I think that comment's great.
Well, if you remember, early in this year, I actually made an effort to try and homogenize our boards and commissions, and it didn't have much legs. We noted that some of the boards were vastly different than others. Let me take this to 30,000 feet. I think Tracy has an excellent point. But what I'd really like us to do is take a big picture view of our citizen involvement from top down, instead of just nibbling away. We had a specific request from a specific board, and I think it was appropriate that we honored it. But I think there's some bigger pictures on how these boards and commissions fit into our citizen involvement. And I'm not sure we have the bandwidth right now to deal with it, but that would be my preference, is that we take a look at a holistic view of what citizen involvement means to Canby.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Parker. Thank you, Councilor Spoon or Hensley, for bringing that up. I appreciate that and that conversation piece. I think, yeah, we take the piece that we've got here in front of us for the library board, and take it back to your as a liaison to the. And again, maybe it's not an issue, maybe it is. And let those committees and boards take a look at it for right now, and then we can figure out what are the bigger fish to fry in that regards. So, okay, great. So all those in favor of the motion to approve 1541?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Great. Item 8.5, new business regarding South Ivy. So Council President Dale brought this up earlier with his report under Canby Utility, but give general public some background. So the South Ivy project is a very, I think, important project to Canby, specifically the south side of town. And so this is a project that is being funded through a number of different pieces, but a big chunk of it is through the State Transportation Improvement Program or project list that we back, almost 10 years ago, applied for, lobbied for, created videos for, and were able to get on the short list, and was given some substantial funding to be able to make this project happen. So fast forward to today, we're finally to the point where we're starting to finalize plans, looking at doing this construction project here in 2021, which will be great. And the conversation over the last couple of weeks has been, what can we do to underground the overhead lines and bring them underground? And so with some heavy conversation by Council President Dale with Dan Murphy, the general manager, some very pointed questions by Councilor Parker regarding the matter. I also had a conversation with the general manager, Dan Murphy, about this piece as well. I think we've we might have an idea. As I talked with Councilor Parker on my way home this evening about maybe looking at how can we make this happen. And so as Council President Daley alluded to in his update about the cost of what Canby Utility could be facing of moving the power poles that they have above ground and taking those funds, and then instead of moving poles, could they contribute that amount of money towards undergrounding it? And so, Councilor Parker, I'm going to kick it to you and finish off your thought or your idea on what we can do with those funds in terms of what's an idea. And I'm going to let you finish it because it's your idea.
Well, I really want to give credit to Dan Murphy, who came up with kind of compromise idea that within his budget, he does not have the funds for it, but he offered to move ahead with the project if the council was willing to participate. So I talked to our city manager and I said, given the fact that COVID has affected city operations, we're not doing some things we thought we were going to do. Some of the big projects we're not going to be able to do. Can you find the funds to participate, meeting these three qualifications? That it doesn't affect city services or staff, that it doesn't impact our reserves, and that we don't have to go into contingency. And so that was the question I asked the city manager, and I'll defer to him on his answer.
Thank you, Councilor Parker. Yeah, this is Scott Archer here. So yes, I am prepared to look at that issue, work with our finance director, Julie Blums, to identify some potential savings from other projects that may not be getting done at this time, as you mentioned, Councilor, or potentially other sources of savings that provide the flexibility to spend funds in this regard. So I think the key here is going to be determining what the cost certain will be for the city, right? So and what the city's contribution will end up being in this process. But I would say that I am reasonably confident to tell you that there are funds available, and that depending on what the final cost to the city is on this contribution, that we, I hope, can make this work. So I will be working on that if this is the direction of the council tonight. And I would be certainly happy to report back to you on that.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. So, so I guess the ask council, based on that the conversation just had, do we want to direct staff into pursuing, as Scott said, trying to, and as Councilor Parker had commented about, are there ways that we can source funds from our current city budget that may or may not be being used, or as delayed, or not going to be done at all because of the current pandemic, that we can figure out how to come up with the difference here to make the undergrounding possible. As for me, I believe that, and Councilor Parker, he and I have had a lot of conversation about this over the last month or so, and Council President Dale as well, that this is a monumental project for Canby. This is life, huge impact, many multi-generational impact. And if we can add this component to it, and much like we did with First Avenue, tighten that piece up, I think that it is worth pursuing with some vigor to make this happen. So that's my 2 cents on it. Obviously, that's just one opinion. You all have just to nod, and we can send Scott on his first of many, many projects that we will unleash him on. So I know where that's at. Councilor Varwick, go ahead.
There's been a few times over the recent couple of years where we've said, what was that council 20 years ago thinking? And I don't want to be that council 20 years from now. There's been plenty of times that I've done a project at my house and completed it and gone, gosh, I wish I had done that instead, or done this part. That would have made it so much better. Maybe it was a little more expensive, but I look back at it and go, gosh, I could have spent a little bit extra money now and had it better for forever. And that's where I'm at, is that this is something that if we don't do it, I think we're going to regret it. And I don't want to drive down Ivy every day regretting the fact that we didn't at least look to see if we could come up with a few dollars to help out with it. So I definitely want to at least look and see if we can find some money to help out with it, because I absolutely think those need to be undergrounded.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councilor Spoon?
Yeah, my feelings are also no secret on this. I think it should be done. It's a legacy project for the community. If we don't do it now, it's not going to get done for 60 or 70 years. So now's the time to do it. If we have the money to participate in some agreement with Cub, I'm all for it.
Okay. Councilor Hensley, comments?
Nothing new to add. I concur.
Okay. Question that I'll throw out there right now. Do we know yet from all of our conversation with Camp Utility, Council President Dale and Scott, maybe you as well, do we know if they're at the point, if they know, does Camp Utility know if they have to replace poles or just move the poles? Do we know that much information yet?
I don't personally know, Mr. Mayor. It's an easy question to Dan to find out. They were looking at a mix of move the ones that are in good shape, replace the ones that aren't worth moving. Yeah, I apologize. I did not get that detail from him today.
Gosh darn it, Council President Dale. How could you, in all that conversation, how could you not?
I know. I tell you.
Jeez, I'm just kidding. No, look, this is to your point, Councilor Varwig, I think this is one of those defining council moves. So if we can get this figured out, this could be a really big win. So Council President Dale, I really appreciate your conversations with Dan and Councilor Parker. I appreciate you continuing to gnaw on the proverbial bone that is South Ivy Street regarding this, and coming up with a solution for our challenge. So I thank you for that. So Scott, it seems to me that there seems to be a general consensus to have you pursue sharpening your pencil with Julie and figuring out where we can come up with the difference here to hopefully make this happen.
Yes, very good. I have clear understanding here, and we will get to work on looking into this and look forward to reporting back to you.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That takes care of 8.5. We will move into item 9, City Administrator Business and Staff Reports. So your first administrator, staff, or business report, Mr. Archer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do have City Administrator's business and reports. For my first time, I have a number of items for you. So I'm not sure if this will be the norm, but it just so happens that a number of things are I think, worthy of sharing with you this evening. So if you'll bear with me for a few minutes, I want to run through a list of items that I think are of interest. First is the bi-monthly reports. Those are included in your packets. I'll just refer you to those, and I'll just say that please let us know if you have any questions about any of that. Second is the discussion regarding December City Council meetings. So December 2nd is our regular meeting with you. We do have some items for you, so that will be just the typical regular business meeting. December 16th, I know there's been some times in the past where the second meeting in December falls near the holiday week, and as I understand, sometimes the council will not hold that meeting. This happens to be, I think, about a full week before the Christmas holiday. So we would have at this point a fairly light agenda, although things can always change and come up later. However, that will be Council President Dale's last meeting, so I think that might be worthy of some time on an agenda. The other component here on December 16th is the mayor and I were recently discussing having a time with the council to put together my work plan. So I appreciate you giving me a few weeks to get my feet on the ground and get up to speed on everything. But it would be nice to get with you as in a reasonable time period and work on the city administrator's work plan. So what I'm suggesting to you to consider is that on December 16th, we could hold a work session from 6 to 7 p.m. prior to the regular business meeting and review my work plan, and then just move into a regular business meeting, which again, at this point looks fairly light, but if we're going to meet for a work session anyway, and then again, I think it would be nice to have some opportunity to recognize Council President Dale's last meeting. So that's my suggestion to you. I'd like to get your consensus or kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down on that.
Just Scott, just for I don't know, food for thought. So generally the first meeting in January when we swear in new council members and which sometimes is a new mayor as well. Usually the meeting starts off with the current council, which Tim Dale would be included in. And then, we usually do a kind of a what to do on that, and then switch over to the new council. I'm not opposed to the 16th at all, and doing that. The other idea maybe would be do an off-cycle meeting on the 9th, Wednesday the 9th for the work session, to do the work plan for you. But I'm flexible any way we want to cut it. So council, if you guys want to roll on the 16th for powwow with Scott and do some goal setting and hear his thoughts on a work plan, we can definitely do that piece as well.
And just to comment on that, Mr. Mayor, I'm good with the 9th as well. If there's preference to do that, that's certainly up to whatever the council would prefer to do.
Okay, I'll just throw it out there. Councilor Parker, you got a comment? Well,
just to underscore your point is that this council does have a tradition of doing a handoff on the first council meeting of the new year. So that's when we'll embarrass Councilor Dale. And it just depends on the preference of the council. I can come up with some ideas for a work plan by December. If others need until January, that's fine as well. Given the fact that we're doing Zoom meetings, the ability, even if some of us are away from home, which I can't really imagine, it's pretty easy for us to Zoom in. So either way, I'm good.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilor Spoon?
I love the idea of doing a work session, not losing too much time before we do it. I'm glad that Scott had some time to get situated, but I would prefer to do one in December just because I think some direction is a good idea in general and making sure that we're all on the same page. My preference would be to keep the 16th just because I've made some plans. I could change them if I must, but the 16th is still 9 days from Christmas. It's not like it's the day before the holiday, so I'm happy to keep it.
Okay. Councilor Farway, Councilor Hensley, thoughts?
I really don't have any plans. So 16th works for me, or whatever works for the rest of the board is fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm flexible as well. So whatever, I'm good. Flexible.
Okay. So let's stay with the 16th. We'll do
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Just if I may, just quickly, and I appreciate the conversation. So if there is a preference for not meeting on the 16th, just to have, that even though it's a good week plus before the holidays, I'm being told here, just kind of as you had that conversation, that it is very unlikely that we'll have any significant issues of business to bring forward on the 16th. So if you want to back up to the 9th for the work session and skip over your December 16th regular meeting, that seems to work pretty well on our end. So that's a little update to your conversation there.
So, yeah, Melissa's not her first trip around the agenda planning of a city council around the holidays. So, no, that's Councilor Parker. You had a comment?
I read between the lines, and I think a great gift is for the council to be out of the hair of city staff.
That tells me what? That the 16th is still a go?
Let's go ahead and push this out till January. I agree with Councilor Spoon. We should not tarry too long, but putting together and assembling a city council meeting has more effort to it than any of us realize. So if we have no true agenda items, let's cut staff a break and get everything settled on the first of the year.
Okay. Councilor Farwig.
Yeah, also in hindsight as well, we will have 3 new counselors starting early in January. Right? Did I read that? Yeah. Did I have that numbers right? We'll have new counselors in 2 new counselors. Sorry, I'm so tired right now. We'll have a couple new counselors starting in January, so it might be good for the new council to have, do that work session.
Okay, so looking at the calendar for January, knowing that the first Wednesday in January is the 6th, and that generally is a jam-packed evening of changing of counselors, and then often a very robust dialogue regarding liaison roles and whatnot. We could probably tentatively put in the schedule of agenda items on the 20th, which would be our second meeting in January, for a work session with Scott. Maybe make that a post-meeting work session where we can have enough room for the proper dialogue. I don't want to rush the dialogue and make sure we give it its full breadth of conversation and not try to cram it into an hour. So we can discuss that more in the coming weeks. Does that seem work for you, Scott?
That works great. Yes, I appreciate the conversation around that. So what I'm hearing is we will not have a December 16th meeting.
That is what I'm hearing.
And we will get back to my work plan after the first of the year. So we're good to go on that. Thank you.
Yeah, that could be a blessing or a curse depending on how active we tend to be. So I'll just warn you with that, sir.
Very good. Okay, I've still got a few more items. I'll keep rolling here.
No, you're good.
Yeah, the next item is the League of Oregon Cities Elected Essentials Workshop. There is a flyer in your packet. It's at the very end of your packet. This is for both, it's a refresher course for current officials, and it is great for newly elected officials as well. Registration is free. There are a number of different dates in December to choose from. It'll say something about try to select your region that you're in with the League of Cities, but it also says you can basically sign up for any of the dates that work for you. So if you are interested, you're welcome to either register yourself or you can get in touch with Melissa and she will help you get registered. I will also tell you that we have provided this information to our new counselors elect. And I think at least one of them so far have replied and will be attending, and we're working on the other one. The next item is just a little update on the COVID protocols and directives. There was already some conversation earlier this evening about the enforcement portion of this, so I will not talk about that any further, but I will just mention a couple of things. So first of all, with the the governor's 2-week freeze or 2-week pause beginning today and running through December 2nd, and how this pertains to city operations. The biggest issue for us there is that the swim center is going to be closed. So it closed as of today. As you know, we reopened after having been shut down for the majority of this pandemic time. The swim center reopened, and we had a good system going for a limited capacity use of that. But under this new 2-week freeze, we are again having to close until such time that that freeze is done. I will tell you that library operations remain unchanged. What that means is our limited curbside pickup program remains in place, so our community can know that that program is still moving forward. Also, for COVID safety reasons, I want to mention that our municipal court will not be doing any in-person court proceedings now through at least the end of December, although virtual or remote arraignments are still happening. And then the other component to this is that under OSHA, there is a new temporary rule, which is essentially a 47-page document that was given to employers, including the city of Canby, that we are required to implement a number of new protocols and procedures, and those have begun, and they go for, I believe it's 6 months. We have a staff committee that was formed and got together and worked very quickly over this last week and a half to quickly implement our citywide staff compliance plan for these new OSHA temporary rules. So there are substantial amounts of work that are occurring within the organization to comply with employee safety. So just wanted to let you know that that is occurring. The next item is speaking of South Ivy Street that we just wrapped up discussing a little bit ago. We are also, as I think you probably know, we are in the process of doing the South Ivy Street Sanitary Sewer Replacement Project. That has begun. That is a project that is replacing over 3,500 linear feet of deteriorated and undersized sanitary sewer collection lines. The project scope is on Ivy from 2nd Avenue to 13th Avenue. So there will be closures and traffic disruptions in that area. This project is being done in anticipation of the South Ivy Street scheduled improvements next year that we just talked about. So this is the sewer replacement in advance of the bigger street project that's upcoming. The sewer project will be going through probably mid to late January is our anticipated timeline there. The next item is we are still recruiting for our planning director. As you know, we completed a second round of interviews and we have finalist interviews scheduled this next week. We hope to have a decision made on that in the fairly near future. Additionally, it's worthy of noting that there are several other recruitments in process right now. Those include a police officer, a confidential assistant for the administrative team, internal police sergeant, a mechanic, and internal police captain recruitment. So we have a number of recruitments. Melissa is very busy with her dual role as city recorder and our new HR manager. And I commend her for all the work that she is doing for the city. Next is, I am pleased to announce that we just received notification this week that the city has been awarded a $5,000 grant from the Ford Family Foundation. This is an economic development grant that Jamie Stickle applied for. And it is for economic recovery strategy. In particular, will be formalizing our business retention and expansion program as related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So $5,000 award, congratulations and good work to Jamie. And that money will be coming our way for some good work. Next is the Light Up the Night event. I know that there are many people that are interested in what is happening with this. Unfortunately, the city of Canby is not able to organize and provide the traditional Light Up the Night event this year. And that is obviously due to the COVID situation. However, there is a sort of an abbreviated version of that. We are going to be doing we're going to fully light and decorate Waite Park as in past years, and then we're going to invite lighted vehicles to the downtown, although there will not be a parade as usual, because we don't want to promote gathering for along the parade route and those type of things. Visitors will be allowed inside Waite Park to view the festive display of lights, which will be illuminated at 6:30 p.m. on Friday, December 4th. The use of face masks is recommended in case of any crowding. We will be closing some of the surrounding roads to promote the ability to have some social distancing and to allow people to come down and enjoy at least the lighting. Also on that, the winner of the Who Lights Up Canby contest will be invited to turn the lights on in Waite Park on the evening of Friday, December 4th. So I'm not doing the usual event, but there is still something happening, and glad we're able to at least do that. A couple more items, getting close to the end of my list here. Next is I am also pleased to announce that the Government Finance Officers Association of the U.S. and Canada, which is commonly referred to as GFOA, has awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting to the City of Canby for its comprehensive annual financial report, which is also referred to as CAFR, for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019. Yes, that is a full fiscal cycle prior. That's how the reporting goes, and then the award process. This certificate of achievement is the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management. So I want to give a special kudos to our finance director, Julie Blum, and our finance team for the great work there. But also to you, Mayor and Council, this is a reflection of sound fiscal leadership by you, the elected officials, and you are all to be commended as well. So congratulations to Canby for our CAFR award. Lastly, an update on our resiliency grant that you supported and implemented at a recent meeting. So I just want to give you kind of a status report on what's going on with that. So first of all, there's the nonprofit and charity portion of that. And I want to let you know that as of now, we have issued $100,000 to the Canby Center, and they have paid out or are waiting to pay out a substantial portion of that. And largely that is going towards rental and housing assistance, and also for utility assistance. So far to date, they have been able to assist 34 families in the Canby community, and their good work continues. So that will continue to move forward. On the nonprofit side as well, as was discussed previously, the city awarded $15,000 of non-CARES Act money to the Kiwanis Club, and about a little over $7,000 to the Canby Adult Center. The Canby Adult Center funding, of course, is going specifically towards food assistance. So some good work being done there. The other component of this is the business grants. So to date, we have received 4 grant applications. We are providing continued outreach to our businesses in town through email, in person, via telephone. We've contacted about 70 businesses in town. We've received a positive response, and we know that there are many more businesses who plan to apply for this funding opportunity. But again, as of now, we've only received 4 applications. The deadline to apply is November 30th at 5 p.m. We are hopeful that that we'll be able to disperse the all or the majority of the funding that you allocated towards the business support. However, I just want to put a little preliminary plug in. If by chance we don't utilize all of that money and we don't fulfill all of that obligation on the business grants, that we might come back to you for consideration of redirecting that over to the nonprofit side of things, because they are the nonprofit work is being implemented quickly and immediately and is being very well utilized. But again, our hope is that many more businesses will apply for that, and we'll be able to award a number of grants, and we'll keep you posted on that. So that concludes my very first of hopefully many city administrator reports to you, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Scott, that was perfect. Thank you, sir. I'm very excited about the success already that we're seeing with the grants that we just talked about our last meeting, to see it moving that quickly. So that's great news. Appreciate the what the economic development team of Calvin and his role, and Jamie and city staff, our parks team. I was talking with Jeff last night about the park getting decorated and whatnot, and I'm glad we're at least moving forward with all that, and we'll create the best of it. Can't talk, I'm running out of words. The best event possible in the current situation. So I appreciate the check and adjust that we're having to do for probably one of our major marquee events here in Canby. So thank you for that. Councilor Farber, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to commend Scott on a great first report. I am no longer worried about saving your job duty description or whatever we call it until January. You are obviously a go-getter and a self-starter, and it sounds like you can come up with enough to keep you busy until we give you more. So
there is no lack of work in front of me. Kudos to the great staff team here. Of course, I'm just coming in and picking these things up, but yes, we have much in front of us, and I certainly have no lack of work to do until we talk about that formally.
Perfect. Councilor Spoon.
Thanks for a great update, Scott. I do have a question. A citizen asked me, and I was not sure, so I thought this might be a good form to ask. Is in regards to the business grants, is there a government transparency component to that where people can see eventually who received the money or how much was received?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Attorney Joe, on that one.
Okay, thank you, sir. We will move into is there any other citizen input, Melissa, that's come in?
There is none, Mayor.
Okay. Action review.
All right, you've approved the consent agenda, provided an oral decision in favor of TA 20-01 and passed ordinance numbers 1539 and 1541 for second readings. They'll come back on December 2nd.
Great, thank you for that. We do have a follow-up executive session that the council will be adjourning to here momentarily. So I won't necessarily adjourn the meeting, but before I read and ask for a motion to go into exec session. Canby, I will say thank you for doing things the Canby way. It has been a crazy 8 months of pandemic and wildfires, and I'm sure tons of personal pieces as well. And even though these things have been going on, I still wish everybody to take the moment and find the joy that is out there, that is still prevalent in all of this. And there are still a great many things to be thankful for this Thanksgiving. And I wish everyone a great Thanksgiving of time of rest and time with family in small increments, we'll say. And so with that, I will take a motion to move into executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I move we go into executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660, parent 2, parent I, performance evaluation of a public officer.
Excellent. Second by Councilor Varwig. All those in favor going into exec session?
Aye.
5 ayes to go into exec session. The city council will enter into executive session for the purpose of evaluating the performance of an officer. The executive session is held under pursuant to ORS 192.660, parent 2, parent I, to review and evaluate the performance of an officer, employee, or staff member if the person does not request an open meeting. Only representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. The council is meeting virtually in exec session. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of session, there will be no further business, and we'll come back into a regular session to either decide and or adjourn for the evening. So Canby, we will say our parting adieus for now. Have a great Thanksgiving. Council, we are in exec session officially. Thank you, Canby.